Workers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your company does and gets away with? Fast food, cooperate, retail, government. Hire temps 4 years at a time, just so they don't have to pay for health care, holidays, paid time off, etc. I guess you can't be 44th richest man in the world by being decent, eh, Michael Dell? When I used to work in retail, we had these things called great values. Every sale we'd put yellow tags on top of items that weren't actually on sale, which we were allowed to do because it didn't actually say sale or special, just great value. It was always funny to see people walk by them and say something like that's a really good deal and buy the item, even though it was regular price. I've seen similar stuff at other department stores, so I assume it must be fairly common. Attorney here. I have a duty to protect my clients at almost all costs, which means at times I have to take positions against people who I know have suffered. It doesn't mean in the eyes of the law that the opposing party is necessarily automatically deserving of something in return, but it does take a lot out of you to require a paralyzed little girl to prove her case. My last job was at a science museum with elaborate exhibits on recycling, water conservation, how to prevent contamination from runoff, etc. The office area of the museum did not have recycling bins. I kept a cardboard box on my desk labeled recycling, do not throw out, and personally delivered my recyclables to the bin in the parking garage every week. Worst of all, the museum contracted with a pest control agency to have the building sprayed regularly to kill spiders that lived on the outside of the building. Not ants or roaches or any other pest that is actually problematic, but spiders, predators that naturally control the pest population. The extermination was ordered regularly solely for aesthetics, and the pesticides were not green. The worst part about this? The Science Museum is built directly over Lake Michigan, so all that pesticide runs directly into the water below. Just a couple examples of the ridiculous hypocrisy at work at the institution, and one reason I quit that job. TL. Doctor, a science museum I used to work for does not practice what it preaches regarding conservation and preservation. We have a zero tolerance violence policy. Basically, we are told that if another employee assaults you, you should just lay on the floor and wait for someone to call security to assist you. If you try to defend yourself, i.e. blocking punches, kicks, repeated stabbing with a knife, you both get fired. It's completely insane. If I'm on the street and someone attacks me and I defend myself, I can press charges against them. But in work, nope. They even make you sign a form stating that you cannot sue the organization for damages. We spent $85,000 apiece to kill people with a yearly gross income of $200. Source: us military. I'm using a throwaway account for obvious reasons. My company has no quality assurance. I'm an engineer for a biotech company that doesn't hire quality assurance engineers for the product. They are way more concerned about selling it and making money. Our engineering team is horribly understaffed and underqualified. The CEO would rather invest more in salespeople more than anything. We have been threatened by our customers to be reported to the government, but somehow we keep sidestepping the issue. Last week a customer reported that our ECG monitoring product was screwing up majorly for kids under 1 year old. For fuck's sake, we have children's lives at stake. The ECG monitoring product also doesn't work for people that have heart attacks and are admitted to the emergency room. Our product is so shoddily built, and the CEO is always against rebuilding it from scratch, since it works just fine. For all hopes of the future, I want this company shut down as soon as fucking possible. It is a plague on the health industry, and the CEO is only interested in money and market. TL. Doctor, I think you guys just better read this shit. I can't fucking sleep at night sometimes knowing that I work for a company that gets away with this shit. A company I worked for installed 800 fake fire doors in a 8-floor building that is home to police officers occupying important posts in the force. They charged around £1,100 for each door. The real doors were just panel doors made to look like fire doors. With everything, including the men installing them, they cost around £130. I felt like a criminal. No one cared. Many retailers put a tremendous amount of pressure on employees, and especially managers, to open a certain amount of loyalty accounts, customer credit cards. I have watched managers outright bribe customers to open new accounts to meet the daily goal, even if they were not likely to be approved, because the managers still get credit for attempting to open new cards. I have also watched employees basically prey on younger people who don't understand how credit cards work in order to open new accounts. I used to work in a restaurant where on busy nights, or on nights when staff were sick, they would ring up people to come in for a 3-hour trial and get them to run out food and drinks to the tables. All unpaid, of course, followed up at the end of the shift by "Sorry, you're just not the right type of person we are looking for." I worked for a gas station. Access to the 75,000-gallon underground tank is protected by a single lock less strong than the ones on high school lockers. The 4-digit password on it was written on the lock in Sharpie. Not that you needed it, it was the store address. I used to work at Ritz Camera. They went bankrupt several times and were always cutting corners. After the first bankruptcy, the photo lab stopped properly disposing of the printing chemicals. Instead, they poured them down the sink or on the ground outside the store. I watched over 30 gallons go down the drain on my last day. Us Navy ships throw all kinds of shit overboard. Paper, plastic, metal has waste, insane amounts of jet fuel. The casualness that everybody has with it is pretty disturbing too. State government. The governor can appoint his friends and buddies to prominent positions in state government, even though the people don't even meet the bare minimum requirements for the jobs. Rounding. The government rounds everything up. Estimating your budget will be $500K. Just round it up to an even million. Need $1. 5 meters? Make it $2 million. Need $5 million? Make it $10 million. The rounding itself doesn't bother me nearly as much as the forced spending. Got your approved budget of $1 million that you rounded up from $500K. Spend it all, or you get less next year. My other annoyance is the massive reliance on contracting. You can't get extra budget to hire a single person, but you can get $2 million slasher indefinitely to contract that work out. To be fair, agencies devise their budgets 2 years in advance, so most err on the side of caution and estimate far more than they actually need to operate. Also, because of the reliance on contracting for so long, most agencies don't know how to do anything themselves anymore. Instead, they are solely a bureaucracy for the management of third parties. Some others, contracting just adds to the overall budget bloat. Developers basically figure out how long it takes to actually do something, then double it. That number is handed to management, who pad it further with general overhead, paperwork pushing, etc., which inflates the total cost even further. I've seen estimates of up to $100K just to make modifications to a handful of static web pages. Those costs are frequently approved. Once something makes it into the budget, it never comes out. I've seen line items for $50K plus to print a report that isn't even circulated anymore. Now they just issue a PDF on the website, but the cost to print paper copies is still on the budget. It gets brought up every few years as something we can remove, but the decision makers on top would rather keep the line item. Lower level people don't fight it because why make waves over something so trivial? Griffles by a much user. They strategically put their donation centers next to or near liquor stores to exploit the fact that it will attract more donors. You get paid roughly $30 to make a donation. You should not even drink coffee for several hours afterwards because plasma donation dehydrates the fuck out of you. You absolutely shouldn't drink. But don't mind the liquor store right there, especially if you're an alcoholic. Like 98% of the donor population is addicted to insert a substance here. They employ people for near minimum wage jobs, run their employees into the ground, and create such a dangerously violent and entitled donor crowd that employees have been attacked, the door has been ripped off, the building vandalized. The donors go apeshit because they know they can get away with it and get paid $10 to go away. It's led to people quitting out of fear. I carried a concealed weapon despite being against company policy because the donor screening rooms are set up in a manner that places the donor between you and the door. Most of us were short little ladies. That is not okay. People get fired for attendance. Anything that isn't a scheduled absence, such as being in the hospital from a car accident, is an infraction. Doesn't matter if you have sick time. People get write-ups because of court dates, illness, children being ill, literally everything. One of my coworkers was fired because her son broke his arm at school and she had to leave work to go to the hospital. I was given a write-up because I had to have emergency oral surgery. I was literally going to die if I didn't get it done in the next 2 days. To top it off, the center I worked in ended up having the whole management staff replaced with Mormons who came up from Utah. It was all fine and dandy until the quality department and the lab staff began to notice everyone was getting fired and replaced with Mormons. 6 months later I was fired for a $20 shortage in my till. On occasion, money sticks together, particularly when you can't tell or peel it apart with nitrile gloves on, but you can't not wear gloves by SOP. About 3 years later I run into an old coworker who ended up fired 10 months before we encountered each other, and he informed me that the center was under investigation for exactly the conspiracy we were joking about. They were firing all non-Mormons and bringing in their kin. Fucking insanity. I have 5 years of hellish stories surrounding this place, and everyone who knows me knows how inhumane the Griffles company treats its employees. You aren't people, you're just shitty equipment with an expiration date to them the day you refuse to bend over and take it up the ass. You're taking too long. It just has to look clean. Washing dishes at a restaurant. I used to work at a family restaurant in a state that did not pay minimum wage to its waitresses. The owner of the joint was this religious guy who was big at his mega church. He encouraged his fellow churchgoers to attend his restaurant after services, and in return they weren't pressured to tip. After all, he still got paid. Us. Hundreds of customers who did not leave a dime. Former cop here. Throw away for obvious reasons. Yeah, we have quotas. They are unethical, but you get shit duties if you don't pull in so much money for the department per month. So, what that means is, say it's the 30th of the month and you haven't met your quota. That means you pull over someone, preferably black, since they are less likely to fight it or sue, who is doing 55 in a 54, and give them a ticket. Also, I'm lucky enough to work in a shall arrest DV state, which basically means that if we get a domestic violence call against you for any reason whatsoever, we are required to arrest someone. It doesn't matter if a neighbor who hates you calls, and when we show up you are the only person home. We are still supposed to arrest you. I've literally been yelled at by a superior because some asshole called in a DV against his neighbor who he had a land dispute with, and I refused to arrest the guy because his wife wasn't even in town. When we got there, she had been out of town on business for a week. It doesn't matter to the higher ups, because once you are arrested for even a bullshit reason, it's money getting pumped into the system. You are going to pay bail if you can, which doesn't get refunded under any circumstances. You are going to spend 12 hours in jail minimum, and unless you luck up and get a decent public defender, which happens occasionally if they aren't already overworked, you are going to pay for a lawyer. Even a bullshit arrest can easily turn into multiple thousands of dollars. Oh, let's not forget the expungement paperwork you have to file, which is another $500 to $600 just to get the arrest removed from your record. The arrest will stay there, even if you are found innocent or the DA refuses to press charges. Let's not forget the money being pumped into parole officers, probation officers, etc. Oh, and in my county in particular, evidence that is confiscated gets auctioned off, and the money goes back into the PD. So, if you are arrested for spotlighting or hunting out of season, or even some BS charges mentioned above, we are going to take your car, your firearms, and possibly any other firearms you own that we suspect you may have used for other illicit activity, and unless you can afford a good lawyer to get them back, we are going to auction all that off, and the money is going to go back into buying us new squad cars and laptops to look at Facebook while we sit in those squad cars. So yeah, don't think the police are here to protect you. We are here to put money back into the system. When I started out I was a starry-eyed kid, thinking I was going to be helping out people and protecting and serving. After a few months, I realized that it was all bullshit, and we are here to use anything you say against you and twist any facts we can against you. It was so bad, at least where I live, that I had to quit. I didn't have the moral ambiguity to keep on. I know not all PDs are like this, and my hat's off to the people who could keep on trying to change the system from the inside. But yeah, at least around here, and as far as I'm concerned for the most part, justice is a racket.